And I'm still not sure I'm a good founder, right? And well, two points. One, that is definitely a big source of my stress because when it's just you and your co-founder and you're just fucking around, it's like great. But at this point, like we've raised over $100 million. We have investors, we have clients, we have team members, right? It sucks because if you fail, that means people lose their money, people lose their trust in you, people lose their service, people lose their jobs. And my co-founder, we take full responsibility for it. So it's very, very stressful.
What do you feel like you're optimizing for now?
Yeah, I feel tremendous responsibility to carrot, right? Toward, as I mentioned, our investors, our clients, our customers, our team members succeeding. And I really, really hope that we make it work. And because we're a venture-backed startup, it might not, and that's going to super, super suck. And I think you see like there's a lot of like cultural tension, I think, over that point where you see some founders give up, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's been a lot of founders in recent years who just returned the money. They raised a lot of money and they're like, hey, you know what? I can't make this work. And they just return it because they're like, well, mentally, this is no longer worth my time, like the opportunity cost, right? And for my co-founder and myself, at least right now, we're like, well, hell no, we're not going to do that because we were given this money with a mission, with a purpose. Like there is a piece around, we got to try harder. And we're not yet at that burnout point where it's like, oh, I would ever consider just returning and giving up. It is very much like, no, like there's responsibility we've been entrusted for to try and hit it. And I think the tension with that comes with how do you balance that with mental health? Because there are a lot of founders who return the money because it's like, oh my God, like they just do not see a path forward and that's just not going to work anymore.
Yep. All right. So a couple more things from my side here. It's not often I get to talk to Asian founders. So how has it been being an Asian founder? Do you just feel like it's like, it is what it is?
Well, I think, even that thing you said, right? I feel sad when I hear that because there historically haven't been as many Asian founders. Mm-hmm. When I used to work in the corporate world, when I used to work at Blackstone or McKinsey, what I recall distinctly is the analysts, many of us were Asian. The middle managers, like we were Asian as well. But like, I did not see many East Asian partners. And I was like, well, that sucks. There is that certain like model minority myth, right? Like, I think, it's changing, but like in the olden days, it's like, oh, like Asian Americans, especially East Asian Americans, like, oh, we're like really good at like doing things, but we're like not good at like figuring out what to do and leading and like trying new things. And like, why did that stereotype develop in the first place? Well, yeah, because like our parents are all immigrants. Like they came over to this country, many of them actually very highly educated and qualified, not having the privilege to necessarily come into like white collar halls of power and to start telling people what to do. They had to do what other people told them. And guess what? They were good at it. And that's sort of what perpetuated the myth. But that's why like we had generations where like we didn't see people necessarily being as aggressive that same way. And like, yeah, sure, maybe there's like a cultural POV in terms of what worked in these Asian countries is different than what works here, like these learned behaviors, right? Now, I think we're finally beginning to see a generation of founders and creators and business leaders who are East Asian, right? Like our generation, the younger generation, because we're finally beginning to reach places of more abundance mindsets and doing riskier things. Like I am beginning to see like a lot of younger generations, a lot of East Asian Americans who are just like, yeah, like, of course I'm going to try this thing. And in some ways, I hope that by like us sharing our journey, that we can inspire that next generation to be like, okay, cool. Like they followed this path and, maybe it was good, maybe it was bad. Is that the path that I want to follow?
One thing I hope to see more of, because I don't know if you've seen this, but I was telling Brad this earlier. It's when you look at like, if let's say we're both Mexican, for example, right?
Sure.
So someone comes after you, like, you're going to help me, right? Same thing, like if we're both black or whatever. But like Asians, there's like this weird crabs in a bucket mentality where sometimes we're just trying to like pull each other back into the bucket. I just like would like to see Asian founders support each other more. And I don't know if that's what you see.
Yeah, I think I'm reminded of this comment I saw recently from someone. I think he or she was Asian. I don't quite remember. But they were like, hey, like you talk a lot about being like an Asian American founder. Like, don't do that. It hurts you. And I was like, well, if I'm being honest, I don't talk about being Asian American to hurt or help the business.
Right.
Like, it's not because like, oh, it's going to like optimally help Carrot 50x times. I talk about it because it goes back to my point on freedom. I just want to be able to say the things and do the things that I think are true to myself. And like, I am Asian American.
Yeah.
Like, I wake up every morning and I see it in the mirror is an empirical fact of who I am.
Yeah.
And so I will share my experience having lived that. I'm not going to like necessarily say that, you know, I'm not trying to be prescriptive to others. I'm trying to just be reflective of my own experience. And I think to your point, I think a lot of times you mentioned like a crabs in a bucket mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe that whenever someone is attacking you, it is always because of some insecurity they hold themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever somebody is angry at you or resentful or calls you out, they're not really mad at you. They're really mad or scared or sad about something themselves. And I think even that you described, it is but a symptom of, yeah, as Asian Americans, like we have gone through these stereotypes of, yeah, we suck at leading and founding, and we're just good at doing stuff. And all of us have had different reactions, how we internalize it and deal with it. And sometimes it comes out in ways where, you know, everyone has their own ways of doing it, and sometimes it's not as productive. And I just try and recognize they too are coming from a place of hurt.
Yep. I think the best thing we can do for as Asian founders, or any Asian founders really, or any founders really, is just to do a really good job and set the example.
See, I like that, but it's also hard because then it puts on the classic amount of pressure where it's like, oh, okay. So if you're an Asian American, you have to do a good job.
Mm.
But it's like, well, I'd love to get to a world where I'm Asian American, and I'm not saying we will, but maybe I'm not, but I can still be valued the same way as someone who isn't, who just tries and fails. There's this classic description, called the glass cliff, I believe, where there's a saying where they'll bring in a minority CEO, like a woman CEO or like a minority CEO, and they'll usually bring one in right when the company's in crisis. Like something like the stock is falling off a cliff. They're going through like tons of issues, and that's when they bring them in. And then of course they like brought him in during a time of crisis, and a lot of times it still doesn't end up working out. And then like that person was brought in gets like all the hate. Like, yeah, because they were in XYZ, that's why. And it's like, well, in a way, like they were brought in the first place because things were so shitty. Maybe other people didn't want to take it on, and they're like, I'll take it on. And so there's sort of this like, you're right. Like, yeah, if we just do a good job, it'll speak for ourselves. But there's also this weird responsibility and burden to be like, oh, because I'm a minority, like I have to do better.
Yeah, I think it's not even like, so I wasn't coming from a place of we have to do better. It's just like, hey, like to your point, work hard, you know, hopefully add some value to somebody, and then set the example so we can keep the cycle going.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to take it one step further and being like, just exist, just try, just be there. Just by doing the work and being a founder, a creator, an entrepreneur as a minority, you're already helping.
I mean, like so we had one of these, like my mom put one of these like Asian family dinners together like a month ago or so. And then one of my rich uncles, like he comes up, he's like, you know, Eric, most human beings are just useless. You don't need that many Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. And then my cousin works for the IRS. He's like sitting there. He's like, yeah, you know, most of the people I work with are useless. I was like, damn. And so it's like, to your point, like these things all actually align. It's like, just work hard, exist, you know, and like let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like to take a different tangent from your point, there will always be someone out there who thinks what you're doing is useless and you are useless. It doesn't matter how big you are. And you can't let that stop you from just doing it anyways. And you never know.